All right.
Yep.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 3 of Women on Watch, where we are a bill club where women get together and talk about the bills that are affecting Kentucky and especially women and our families in the Kentucky General Assembly in 2018. So we're going to move on through the slides here and just remind you tonight's video will be shared publicly. Comments may be seen by people outside this group. We are making this up as we go, so please be patient. Suggestions and volunteers are always welcome. Speakers are asked to keep their comments brief so that we have enough time for every category, speaker, and Q&A at the end. Speakers are asked to discuss bills that recently had movement or are expected to move this week, and future bills can be discussed in subsequent weeks. And then keep coming back every Monday at 6 p.m. to join us for this conversation. Help us find experts for each program, issue, and bill. Women are preferred. And this Zoom software does cost us $160 for the 3 months that we are in session. And we have paid that out of the Save Our Schools Kentucky budget. So we are accepting and appreciating donations. And there is a link, the paypal.me/SOSKY link is how you can donate and help us offset these costs. This is a 1-hour conversation plus a 30-minute Q&A. So we've done the housekeeping. We're going to have Attica talk about the latest bills that she sponsored. She is one busy woman. And then we're going to talk about SB 71, which is the abstinence bill. And Tamari Weeder is going to cover that for us. On the education front, we'll talk about a couple of bills that are moving. And then Naomi is with Together We Will, and she does a tremendous job keeping the Bill Watch list updated every day. And she gives us a call to action that we can use and follow. So if you're not a member of Together We Will, you should be, because that's where she's always posting these updates and tips and best ways to go about talking about these bills. And then Anna Weitz is our special guest today. She's a healthcare attorney, and she's going to talk about bills specific to healthcare that are coming through the legislature. Then at the end, we'll cover resources and action items, and then we'll have the Q&A at the very end. For open discussion, we encourage you to put your questions and comments in the comments in the Facebook chat, and Stephanie will be helping us moderate those questions as you post them. And then this replay will be available on YouTube and shared by the other groups that are helping us with getting the messages out about these bills. And then again, keep coming back every week and improving as we go. These are some links that will be posted in the comment section at the end of the video. We're going to start with Attica, and she's going to talk about some bills that she has just recently introduced. Attica, take it away.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much, Gay, and thank you to everyone who is tuning in. If you're having any difficulty at all hearing me, please let me know. I know that sometimes my internet connection is unstable. I'm still here in the Capitol, so sometimes the connection is unstable. And I'll probably have to leave at around 6:30 because our carpool is gonna get back on the road to Louisville. So I really wanted to focus in on House Bill 236, but I'll go quickly through the first 4 that are listed. So House Bill 211 was sponsored by Representative Flood, and it really is a way to try to close the gap in the loss in state funding to public education that has been proposed in the governor's budget. And so it would create a 3-cent fee from dealers on gallons of gasoline, and those funds would be used to support education excellence. And so again, that's House Bill 211. It's been introduced to the House Appropriations and Revenue Committee, so you can follow that bill in its movement in committee. And then House Bill 219 is, of course, sponsored by Representative Dennis Keene, and many of us have signed on to, or many folks have signed on to co-sponsor that bill that's currently in Appropriations and Revenue. And it's really designed to create a fund focused on addiction prevention and recovery. And of course, we know the impact of the opioid crisis here in Kentucky, and the importance of having a fund specifically focused on prevention and recovery rather than what we see too often now, which is incarceration for people who are struggling through addictions. And then House Bill 233 would reestablish a prevailing wage law for all public works projects. It was primary sponsor is actually Representative Cantrell, and it's currently in the Education Development and Workforce Investment Committee. So if you're interested in public work projects and making sure that people are paid the prevailing wage, you can follow it through that committee. And then House Bill 235, sponsored by Representative Marzian, currently in Health and Family Services, would repeal the 24-hour abortion information waiting period, which for a state as lengthy as Kentucky and how much travel time it will take to get to this in-person physical information setting, repealing this 24-hour waiting period could make a huge difference in people's lives. And then House Bill 236, I sponsored. It was filed last week. It's currently in Appropriations and Revenue, and it would exempt from sales and use tax feminine hygiene products, diapers, diaper wipes, baby bottles, baby nipples, and liners, and breast pumps. And I actually had someone on Facebook Live on Friday ask if this include some of the razor bump cream that men have to use, and I said no. This is a bill that is focused on the tax that women who have to have these feminine hygiene products and babies who really need to have much of what's listed here need, and it's not a luxury, it's a necessity. And so, as I said on the Facebook Live, if someone files an amendment that's approved, that's one thing, but no, this bill does not cover razor bump cream for men. So thank you all so much for the opportunity to just go over those bills quickly, and particularly highlight House Bill 236.
Thank you, Attica. And thank you for those bills. Those are great bills to have going through the legislature. So Tamari's going to talk a little bit about SB 71, but before she does, I pulled down a couple of videos from the last few weeks. On January 11th, in the Senate Education Committee, we heard a testimony from 4 brave women. You can see their picture up here in the top right of the screen. I encourage you, I will post this link in the comments at the end. Stephanie may be able to grab it. I'm not really sure though, because this is a screen that is not copy and pastable at this point, but we will share this link, and I encourage you to go out and listen to the testimony starting at the 14-minute mark about the experiences of women. And then note how the men dismissed those concerns, the fact that having an abstinence bill is genderized and shames the woman. No, there was no concern about how this would be implemented and how it negatively impacts women. So that's a video that I encourage people to watch. And then on Wednesday, it left committee, it passed committee. All the white men passed the bill out of committee and onto the floor. And Senator Meredith, who is the sponsor of this bill, spoke for quite some time about why this simple little bill is what he kept calling it, and how it's become so controversial. And so I pulled out some of the quotes. He said there's a hidden agenda that belongs to ACLU and Planned Parenthood, and they will not be satisfied until every school-age child. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to read this to you because I've got a link to it, and I'm going to play it. I have it queued up right here. I'm going to play 2 minutes worth of this video if you don't mind. I can't see my play button. Can you hear the sound? Can you hear the sound?
No, not right
No
now.
sound. All right, hang on. Well, I thought I had the technology to do this. I may need to turn my sound up. Can you turn the sound up on my monitor? If I get out of full screen, I think I can do it. I tell you what, I'm going to go back to the slideshow because I'm having some audio difficulty here, and I can't get out of my full screen now. Why not? Hang on. It's trying to cast. There we go. Sorry about that. I can't get my control panel back. There we go. I'm sorry. I'm having a little challenge with my technology. I think I have it under control again. I wanted to go back to the video. We're going to let Tamari talk, and then I'm going to queue up the audio. Hopefully I can get the audio restored by the time she's through talking. So Tamari, please take over. Sorry about that.
No, thank you, Gay. Yeah, it's like Gay was talking about, SB 71 has been moving pretty quickly through this session. SB 71 requires abstinence until marriage be taught as the expected standard in any sex education curriculum. What's really important to note about this is that it mandates any form of sex ed. This bill mandates any form of sex ed within the state of Kentucky. It may not sound harmful at first, you know, when you first read the bill, what's wrong with teaching it as the expected standard? The problem with this is that those who don't meet that standard are shamed. It creates an unsafe environment for students who are sexually active, whether it's by their choice or if they had been raped, to come forward and seek help within their schools. Other language in the bill also talks about how abstinence is the only way to protect yourself against unwanted pregnancy or STDs before marriage, and through a mutually faithful monogamous relationship, you are also protecting yourself to the best extent against any sexually transmitted diseases or infections. Now, what's problematic here is that it's not teaching you actually how to prevent STDs or unplanned pregnancies. What would be really important to do here is have a conversation about comprehensive sex education and especially healthy relationships and consent. We, I think, all know that you can still get an STD or have an unplanned pregnancy while in marriage, or in what you might think is a mutually faithful monogamous relationship. We need to protect ourselves and be well informed about our bodies. So we have been advocating for specific language about the bill to be taken out. And most specifically, the shaming pieces, the expected standard, the out of wedlock, in the context of marriage, be struck from the bill. What we have seen, though, is that a lot of white men have become really afraid of women pushing back on this bill. And in particular, the senator who sponsored it, Senator Meredith, even got to the floor and said, "The lady doth protest too much, methinks," when talking about opposition to the bill. So he has taken it to a gendered lens. He also focused on the purity of young girls and not that of boys. I think before he got to the floor last Wednesday, we couldn't say that his intent was to shame. But it was very clear after his long testimony that it is to shame and it is to gender this, so that girls' purity is focused on. So that girls' opposition, women and girls and people who are non-binary don't have a voice and they should be shamed for it. And his language was very incriminating of all this. It even, it even made one senator who is not supportive of Planned Parenthood get up and say that the debate on the bill had turned so unhealthy that nobody wants victimizations of children. He specifically focused on 10-year-old girls. You know, that this was the problem with government today. He still voted for the bill, but he felt that the language around it was problematic. So we're waiting to see if it's posting to committee. The Education Committee is not meeting tomorrow, but if they post it, we anticipate potentially seeing this as soon as next Tuesday morning. That's all I got, Gay, unless you want me to go further.
I'm trying to play his video and I've got the sound up on my monitor, but I don't know if you can see the video or not.
No video.
Hang on. I think I know what I'm doing wrong.
dependent on making people feel
There you go.
that's the mantra. Abstinence shames people.
All right.
But they have little to no regard for young people
Can you hear him?
who are ashamed, bullied, disrespected, and immersed in pressure by their peers because of their religious beliefs regarding sex, or because they simply decide on their own they want to be abstinent.
I think I'm queued up a little too far.
Stated absence of 98%
It was the 10:20 mark that I wanted to hear, so I apologize. I'm gonna try and go back to that.
I apologize to you because there is, in fact, a hidden agenda.
Here we go.
It's not mine. This hidden agenda belongs to ACLU and Planned Parenthood and their partner entities. These people will not be satisfied, literally, until every school-aged child, 10 years of age and older, is not just sexually aware, but sexually active with multiple sex partners and become totally desensitized to sexual experiences. ACLU does not want this bill because their very existence is dependent on making people feel like they've been victimized. Thus the mantra, abstinence shames people. But they have little to no regard for young people who are ashamed, bullied, disrespected, and immersed in pressure by their peers because of their religious beliefs regarding sex, or because they simply decide on their own they want to be abstinent over sexual activity.
Oh wait, I think there's more.
Absence of 98% ineffective in preventing pregnancy and tracking sexually related transmitted disease. I'm sure you're aware of the adage that figures don't lie, but liars figure. I ask you, 98% of who? 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds? One of the things abstinence does is hopefully delay the sexual experience for a child until they're mentally, physically, and emotionally ready for this experience. Do you really want your 10-year-old daughter or granddaughter to believe it's okay to have sex with a 15-year-old boy in the name of sexual awareness? This is their agenda. Planned Parenthood will not support abstinence monogamy because their business model of profits depend upon distributing contraceptives, treating sexually transmitted disease, and performing abortions, killing unborn babies.
All right, I think that's enough.
Yeah, and he goes on, you know, to then bring up the testifiers and call them liars and say that they were presenting mistruths about his bill. One of the biggest complaints about our opposition has been said that we are against abstinence. Never have we said that we are against abstinence, but abstinence taught in a vacuum is not helpful, and this bill is shameful. And I think even by seeing that snippet, and he goes on for a lot longer, and then after the bill is voted on, he gets back to the floor and he makes his intent clear. But this is to keep shaming women, because he shamed the women who stood up, and that it's focused on girls' purity. So I would urge you all to vote, to call your representatives to tell them to vote no on SB 71.
Thank you, Tamari. Moving on, I'm going to do a little
Hold on, I got a
update on-
question.
Yes,
got a
go ahead,
question
Stephanie.
from
Sorry,
Hilda.
please.
Who are the most likely to swing to a no vote on SB 71, and should we currently just pressure the committee to think more seriously about this? People are asking, what should we do?
Right now, I would focus on the committee. I would focus on the education committee. I think that they're really our only hope. If it gets to a floor vote, I think that this will pass. So right now it would be to focus, Bam Carney is the committee chair. I'd focus on him. Maybe Scott Walz, Representative Walz, is not really well liked by the Republican Party, but maybe focus on him for a floor vote to get up and at least speak against this to show the nonpartisan side of it. But the committee would be the focus.
Attica, are you still on? One of the things that I noticed and was really surprised about was the number of Democratic males who voted in favor of this bill. And I think that it's just a lack of information. Like, a lot of these folks have really good intentions. They just hear the rhetoric and we're not getting through to them. And if we can reach out to, if this is an indication, then I think if we can reach out to the Democratic males in the House and help them understand how this is a a gender biased bill and it's harmful and hurtful to women, we might be able to get some more no votes in that regard. There was also an amendment from Denise Harper Angel to try to replace the content listed with content based on national health education standards. And there was some kind of shenanigan that took place. I still don't completely understand everything that happens in the Senate or on the floor, but she didn't call for a roll call vote in time. So they just did vocal yays and nays. And so we don't even get to know who was in favor or opposed to the amendment that she proposed. But the amendment is a very logical amendment. And maybe we could even find someone in the House to try it again. Tamari, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think we can find somebody in the House to put up the amendment that she did. I think it's really interesting because in the committee, in the Senate committee, when this bill was heard, Senator Meredith said that he would be the first one to support comprehensive sex education guidelines. And that's all the amendment was comprehensive sex education guidelines. And he called it an unfriendly amendment. What was also very disheartening was that from what I heard about when Senator Harper Angel called for the roll call was that she didn't have support from the Democratic colleagues on the floor to make sure that that roll call happened. And so when she was calling for it alone, she didn't get any support, and not even support from the 4 other senators who voted against this bill.
It's odd. It was odd to watch. Like I said, I'm still learning some of this, but all right. Well, I appreciate that. I'm going to give a couple of updates on education. 70, were there any other questions?
No, not at this time.
Okay. Last week, Jim Wayne was on, and we talked about the House Bill 134, the scholarship tax credits bill, and he cautioned how the churches were sending out email blasts and including in their newsletters an appeal to their membership, to their parishioners to contact the legislators. And our legislators have told us that they're getting a large number of calls based on this request. The problem is these parishioners are not being told the full story. So when Jim Wayne was on last week, he emphasized how this bill is harmful to the most vulnerable populations. And if church members actually knew that this bill was harmful, that they would probably not support it. So we've kind of been encouraging people to talk to their parishioner, to their priests, and explain to them how this bill is hurtful. And we actually heard back from one of our followers from last week that she had done so. I blocked out the names because it could apply to any, this happens to be a Catholic church, but it could apply to any parish. And basically she said she's reached out to the priest and he had no idea that this bill had. He hadn't gone so far as to think about how it might negatively impact others. It's being sold as this is a scholarship tax credit. People get to deduct it from their taxes. Who wouldn't do it when you're only told that piece of information? So I wanted to share this story, this testimony, because I encourage others to do the same. The people who are promoting this bill within their church are not doing so because they're evil. It's because they're unaware. And we have to help people understand that this is part of the ALEC agenda, the Koch agenda. Again, if you're not familiar with who ALEC and Koch are, please Google them. There was an article out in today's paper about their semi-annual meeting that took place where they're investing another $400 million in buying seats and getting ahead of the grassroots movements that are turning things around in various states. They don't like the fact that they're starting to lose their super majority like they have here in Kentucky. So be aware that big money and big power is buying these seats and writing these laws, and it's not friendly to our republic. So there are some links here as well that I'll share. And then the next screen I have is about Bevan's budget and the assault on education. We talked briefly about this last week as well, but people are starting to get more informed about it. The Northern Kentucky superintendents on this left side of my screen here, they actually sent out a united message of urgency, encouraging people to contact their legislators and speak out against these cuts to education, because most of the cuts in Bevan's budget are cuts to education. The transportation is at risk of dropping below the state mandated 50%, which was a Rose versus Council decision that was part of CARA 28 years ago. They're telling us to spin down our contingency funding, which is not good practices. It could put us at great risk of not being able to fund situations and emergencies. It's a threat to our local school board's fiscal control, taking the decision-making ability and money decision-making ability and spending ability away from the local school boards is taxation without representation, if nothing else. It pushes cost burdens down to the local school district and to the taxpayers, and you will see school districts that are already in dire financial straits potentially going bankrupt. This is not going to be a positive thing for a lot of our school districts, and it's just a shift. It's not saving any money, it's just shifting the responsibility, and it's also power grab. There was an article out that came out about an hour and a half ago on Insider Louisville about some of the coup attempts that are going on in Jefferson County. I encourage you to go and look at the struggle between people that got pushed out of our local school board, and now they're trying to push the state to take over our school board, saying that we are not capable, that our school board members, our elected school board members, are not capable of managing the district. So I think it's a last gasp. I think they're desperate and they're trying anything and everything they can, but they're very powerful and they're very wealthy, and we have to keep an eye on that, because our vote should matter. Our elected officials should be able to do the jobs we elected them to do without having people come in and usurp their power. So Eric Kennedy of Kentucky School Board Association, I hope to have on as our guest next week to talk in more detail about the budget, but I just wanted to make you aware, because this is an evolving story, like hot off the presses with today's story as well. So any questions on that before we move to Naomi?
Yeah, there's one here.
All right.
Talking about the that original note you received about the call where everybody was calling Frankfurt. Matilda's asking, isn't it a violation of the 501c3 to effectively lobby for certain political action through your congregations?
I would think so.
There's something, I mean, it's muddy, whatever is going on there. So
it is technically a violation. Unfortunately, those are really hard to enforce. There's not really a state enforcement mechanism. I know last year we filed several complaints on Focus on the Family, which does a lot of the same behaviors. And those complaints go to the IRS and disappear into a black hole, essentially. They don't have a requirement to get back to you. There's no closing the loop. It's not like a whistleblower complaint. They don't tell you, yes, this is what we decided, or no, you're wrong. So I encourage people always to report to the Secretary of State, to the extent it's a state nonprofit, and to the IRS, any 501c3 that engages in lobbying or political action. It's good to build that file, but in 27 years, I've not seen any time in which the IRS has taken action in the state on that issue.
Wow. Thank you, Anna. All right, moving on. Naomi is going to talk about bills on the move and also some new bills in the House and the Senate. So she's got several slides here. I'm just going to try to keep paging through them while she tells us what we've got on tap here.
Okay, hi everyone. Before I get started, so I revamped the Bill Watch document and I posted it in the group, and that just makes it easier for me to generate my call lists. It's organized by committee and organized, so like the committee that meets Monday at 8 a.m. is the first one up, but obviously SB 71 is first because it's like past a chamber and it's onto the House. Attica on Friday gave me a strategy for calling. If you have time, if you don't have time, tell your message to your legislators, but go through the list. And she said, let's see, if you support the bill, contact the committee or the chairs of the committee. And then if you oppose the bill, contact the sponsor. Yes, there it is. And I'll post the link. And so I've made now the bill sponsor is the first sponsor, and then all the additional ones, well, you can see it there. Yeah, so if you have time, go through that, make a list. It's kind of hard for me to do that on the call list because I'm trying to go to a broader audience. So that will really take you delving into it. But she suggested that strategy. So yeah, it's getting longer on the side. Okay. So these three bills, we touched on them last week, and they're supposed to go for a vote. I think when it means a passage, someone can correct me or, tell me it means it's on the whole floor vote. So it's out of committee and it's just for everyone. So I haven't seen if these have moved, but HB 30 would require 2 hours of in-person suicide prevention training, which sounds great. HB 55 would require the Kentucky Board of Education to put in regulations to require physical and health education instruction in drug abuse prevention. And then HB 132 would require a financial literacy program, which are all great, but Gay pointed out last week, how are we going to fund them? We're trying to deal with the budget and all these cuts proposed, so these are great bills, but they need funding. And I forgot to mention that we have one bill that has passed. It's SB 3, which was Marcy's Law, and which is let's see, crime victims' rights. And I don't know, like the ACLU is not for it, but I know Attica is for Marcy's Law. So, but it's going to be up for an amendment, a constitutional amendment. So that means we are going to vote on it in November. So it's been sent to the Secretary of State to be put on the ballot. And I think, Stephanie, do we get 4 amendments?
Yeah, each side gets 2.
Okay, so each side.
It might be the House and the Senate.
Okay, so this was a Senate bill. So they have one more to go. So that bill, so we as voters decide if that will go into law. So I would suggest reading up on Marcy's Law and getting both sides of that. Yeah. Okay. So another bill that is supposed to pass on Tuesday, SB 37, would allow federal and state prisoners to get driver's licenses so they could participate in work programs. Sponsored by Senator Harris, which would be a good bill.
Well,
What? Oh,
it could be a good bill. I'd question how those state prisoners are going to get paid. I mean, are they going to get it like, what, 50 cents an hour? Is this just a way to get slave labor out into Amazon or something?
Yeah, that's a good point. Because Senator Harris, he's my rep, but I've never seen him do anything, so I don't know. Yeah, the motive. What is the motive really behind this?
I would find out more about that. To get a driver's license so they can go work in programs. That just sounds like somebody's needing some cheap labor, like Jimmy John's or something,
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you. HB 147 would require schools to come up with a plan for students with seizure disorder. So we support that. And that's gotten a second reading and it goes to rules. So it's making its way through the House. SB 68, this is sponsored by Senator McGarvey, and that would, victims of domestic violence right now have to pay the legal fees for their abusive spouse, so this would, they wouldn't have that obligation on them. And that's going to rules, and it's gotten a second reading. Okay, so these bills have moved into committee or have been introduced. SB 99 would require an employer with multiple employees to be subject to wage discrimination requirements, sponsored by Senator McGarvey in the Senate Economic Development, Tourism, and Labor Committee. SB 103, which was filed before the Marshall County shooting, but has gotten, the timing is still awful. This would allow schools to have an armed employee or a school marshal. So they would be armed, and Moms Demand Action is against this bill, and we're against this bill because guns should stay out of school. It's sponsored by Senator West and in the Senate Education Committee. SB 107 we support because it would abolish the death penalty for people diagnosed with serious mental illness. And that is sponsored by Senator Adams and in the Senate Judiciary Committee.
All right, let's slow down a second.
Yeah, I was
Sure.
going to say, before we move on.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I got a couple of things here from our audience.
Yeah.
SB 37, she states that the prisoners would get that license upon release.
A release from the, oh, okay. Is that in the,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
I see it at the bottom.
oh, there it is at the bottom. Yeah. So
Huh.
I guess, so maybe that's a good thing, right? I mean, it's a good thing.
Why don't they already, I guess is
Yeah.
one question.
The question.
Well, this is, I think, a bill that will allow them, and I'm going to put in a plug for Representative Harris, who is an attorney, but also a really good guy, in my opinion. And in a rural county particularly, this allows prisoners who are transitioning to a work release or halfway house to have the means of going to education, going to substance abuse classes, or even work release when they're nearing the end of their jail term. And so, yeah, you're probably right. If they're still in the incarceration, they probably won't make very much money, but it would allow them to get work experience. And I think this bill is similar to the Republican bills that say we should educate prisoners. We should let them get job training as welders while they're incarcerated. But this is allowing them a very real way to regain some independence, or even a large number of our population are very young or from cities, and a lot of these young men and women don't have licenses. And so this would be a way for them, like a GED. You get to learn to drive while you're in prison, and then you could do work release or drive once you're in the halfway house. And it makes it a lot easier to get a job and to show that you have identification if you've got a license.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So it sounds great. Yeah. Okay. That's good to know a little about, he's my senator, so I should learn more about him. Okay. Thank you so much, Anna.
And then I got another question.
Oh, sure.
Are seizure disorders not already covered by 504 plans, 504 plans? I don't know.
I have no idea.
I should know that, and I don't. They probably are to a certain extent. When you see a narrow targeted bill like this, there probably is some exception or loophole. But I don't know. I don't do a lot of education law.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that either. We can try to find that out and put it in the comments.
And I'll just add that there's an Amy Clancy here that says that her school already has an armed police officer in-house every day. I'm not sure what school that is at this time.
A lot of us have SROs, so yeah, that's
Correct.
not surprising.
What's an SRO?
School resource officer.
Okay.
And they're often sheriff's deputies. So they are armed or potentially armed already.
Okay.
Okay.
Is that Jefferson County mostly?
I think it's all over the state, depending
Yeah.
on the school and the area you live in. But yes, Jefferson County definitely has a number of them.
Franklin County also.
So let's talk about SB 103, the school marshal
Yeah.
bill. I have some concerns about that one simply because if you look at the situation that happened in Marshall County, I'm sure that it happened very quickly. And the student who pulled the gun, who came in shooting, is one of their students. And to put our teachers and our staff in a position to have to decide that they need to shoot one of their fellow students in that kind of a crisis situation just does not make sense to me. And I really don't know if there aren't just as many, if not more, opportunities for someone to shoot a student by accident thinking that they're a threat when they really may not have been. So I personally would not like to see anyone placed in a situation where they have to make that decision or live with the consequences if they called it wrong.
That is a good point. Yes.
Yeah.
Wasn't there an issue recently at one of the schools here where the police were involved? What school is that?
J-Town? possibly?
Yeah. So, yeah, you make a really good point that that's a hard decision for a teacher, an employee to make.
I think if you look at law enforcement data, because they teach law enforcement to shoot to kill, that's why the cops don't get trained to shoot you in the leg. They're supposed to shoot you in the chest or the head. A massive number of trained police officers in a situation like that completely miss the bad guy or bad girl. And so I think if law enforcement who are trained to do that, trained to shoot an adult who's being aggressive, miss something insane like 90% of the time, even though they're wonderful shooters, I think Gay's right. We can't place school employees in a position where they'd be potentially mowing down innocent bystanders or making difficult decisions.
And I don't know if we have all the details on the shooter yet, but I know that Bevan called it a day of evil or an act of evil, and I'm still thinking that's someone's son, that's
Yes.
someone's classmate.
Yeah.
I don't know that we can determine he was evil. His actions were evil, but he may have had a mental health issue. He may have been bullied. There may have been so many other factors that played into that could have been identified and led to a prevention of this incident in the first place. And so for them to label a fellow classmate without knowing the full story upsets me as well. That mother was someone's peer. You know, she's in the PTA. We all know people in our PTA and in our school that if something like that happened, we would have compassion. I would hope for everyone involved in the situation. It's an unfortunate and horrible incident, but who knows what really played into it? We can't. I just don't think I think it's premature to label it like that.
Agreed.
Absolutely.
So I do want to let you know that Connie Courtney, is that her name? Do you guys know, from Moms Demand Action? I've got a slide at the end that says her name correctly, but she will be with us next week. She will be speaking about this and two other bills that they are opposed to. So on the very last slide in this presentation, we'll see what those bills are, but I know SB 103 is obviously one of them.
Yeah.
Any other questions, Stephanie, or any other discussion you guys want to have on these bills?
Someone just mentioned that, hold on. You know, why not address the improper storage of firearms, which Moms Demand Action does do that with their Be Smart program. And that's to, you know, prevent moments like this where someone is feeling outrage and also suicide. Because, you know, if someone's suicidal, they might go start looking in your drawers or grandma's drawer to go find that gun because they had a bad day at school. You know, it's very, with the social media and everything, the suicide rates are up. So, I mean, it's just responsible gun ownership to lock it up, especially if you got a teenager in home, because these are just terrible times for them.
Absolutely.
The bullying, you know, I couldn't even imagine. Back in my high school, you know, there was bullying going on, but I can't imagine what it would be like today with social media and this constant access and just our toxic environment right now, you know. So it's, you know, I hope that parents, you know, if you're in a safe environment and you don't need that gun 24/7, just lock it up, because your teenagers might seriously use it to end their life. And I don't understand how they still want that gun in their nightstand, you know, because, you know, it's just fragile days we're in, you know, and I just can't imagine being an adolescent and at this time.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I got off there.
Okay. Yeah, I'm no expert on these bills. This is my second year doing this, so I really appreciate it. So if you have any more information, please comment or from the panel. Okay, HB 225 would prohibit the advertising of opioids, sponsored by Representative Donahue, and then the House Judiciary Committee. We see that as a good bill until further information. House Bill 226 would allow a peace officer to make an arrest for low-level offenses. There's a bill similar to this already filed, and you know, it could sound nice, but it would just, you know, what are the offenses? I mean, it could increase incarceration, and we're trying to reduce that, and, you know, criminal justice reform is what we're asking for. The sponsor is Representative Stan Lee, and it's in the House Judiciary Committee. HB 227, which got some light last week when it was posted in committee, and supposedly enough people called and they didn't have a hearing, but it's labeled as the anti-solar bill. So it kind of, let's see, would remove net metering and would hurt the solar energy industry here in Kentucky. It's sponsored by Representative Gooch Jr. and it's in the House Natural Resources and Energy Committee. House Bill 237 we support because it would allow public employees the right to organize, gather, and strike. That's sponsored by Representative Cantrell, and it's in the House Economic Development and Workforce Investment Committee.
Any questions, Stephanie, on these slides or any discussion you ladies would like to engage in?
There was someone asking that where on the LRC site do they go to find out what bills are coming up in committee and when? They're very interested in when the CONCON and the anti-solar bill will be heard in committee.
So every day, well, let's see, every night I think they update it. If you go on the LRC website and you go down towards the bottom and it will say legislative calendar, and that will tell you which bills are going to be in committee the next day or who's even meeting. I don't have the information like ahead in the week as I guess a citizen what's going to be heard, but if you want to know what's going to be heard the next day, that information is there.
And like tomorrow, the House Education Committee meeting has been canceled. So anything that was likely to come through the House Education Committee won't do so for another week, but they also have the ability to push things to other committees. So just
Right.
because something seems logical to go through a certain committee doesn't necessarily mean that it will. You just kind of have to stay on top of it.
Yeah, I remember last year, I think some of the abortion bills or the one takeaway funding was in like veterans, military affairs, and public protections, which doesn't really make sense. So yes.
We got, someone says, Cindy says, HB 227, I got a call from a survey misinforming me about this bill. It will keep everyone from having to pay for solar users. And offer you to contact me directly to the committee. That's that misinformation feeding out there, huh?
Yeah.
It's frightening.
Huh.
Let's see, what does HB 226 consider as a low-level offense? That's a good question.
It's in the bill, and I don't have it off the top of my head, but if you went in and read the bill language, yes, I remember some. It's if the person poses a threat of any way to themselves or the police officer. That was one of them. That's the only one that comes to my mind, but that's just an example. What does that even mean? What is a threat? You know, it's just.
Can't they already? I mean, that sounds like something I've seen them do.
Yeah.
So, all right, moving on to the next slide.
Okay, House Bill 240 is being labeled the anti-immigration bill, and I remember seeing this last year in the session. It would require law enforcement or basically the Kentucky police to act kind of as ICE agents, would prohibit local governments from adapting sanctuary policies, would pull funding from schools that enroll undocumented students. And it's represented by, or sponsored by Representative Lynn, I don't know, is it Bechtler?
Yeah, Bechtler.
Bechtler. Yeah, thank you. And it's in the House Judiciary Committee. Then we have House Bill 242, which is looking to abolish current boards of education and merge the existing school district, which is sponsored by Representative Toby Harold and in the House Education Committee. House Bill 243 would like to merge the existing 120 counties into just 24. So that would change like tax districts. It would change who represents you, in the Kentucky legislature. It's also sponsored by Representative Harold, and it's in the House Local Government Committee. And then House Bill 258 is an emergency bill, which I guess as soon as it goes into law, or as soon as it passes both chambers, it goes into law. I think that's what emergency means.
Well, it has to be signed by the governor, but as soon as that happens, it's effective rather than having to wait until July.
Right, okay, yes, thank you. And that would prohibit practitioners from engaging in conversion therapy. Again, this was also filed last year, I remember, and it's sponsored by Representative Jim Wayne.
So real quick on 242 and 243, we're hearing that those bills have caught so much backlash that they probably won't be moving forward. But it just gives you an idea of some of the crazy agendas that are being pushed right now. And you can't help but wonder if there's not ties to the privatization folks, the Koch agenda. Somebody made this, probably a joke, but it's still worth sharing, I think. Having less districts and less school boards mean less seats they have to buy, so less money they have to invest in their campaigns. But it's also just a power grab, you know. I thought we were all about local control, but not when our boards are actually making decisions that benefit our students and our taxpayers. They seem to want to take the control away from us. So just keep an eye on those.
I mean, you see how they say new boards of education would be appointed, right?
yes,
Everything would
the
be
governor,
appointed.
governor loves appointing people that don't, to replace the people
Yeah.
that he
I
doesn't.
mean, they're
agree
still
with.
going to probably, and this is the same group that wants to appoint senators from now on, right? Instead of our electing them. It sounds crazy, but that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yep. Any questions coming in off of the chat on any of these?
HB 242 and 243 seems to overlap. How would Rep. Harold reconcile these?
I suppose they would need to call and ask him.
Yeah. Email him. Like, even if you have time, like, reach out to someone that doesn't represent you. I mean, they might not listen because they might say you're not my constituent, but it doesn't hurt. I mean, you still live in the Commonwealth, and they're still working for you, and you're, so go for it.
Yep. And if you're a member of one of those bigger groups like Kentucky Teachers in the Know or Together We Will, you might even be able to ask that question in one of those groups and find someone who is Toby Harold's constituent and ask them to ask.
Yeah.
You know, we have a way to network and communicate with lawmakers through our social groups as well, and we should be exercising that. You know,
Find his Twitter.
What's that?
I said find his Twitter, and if he has one,
Yes.
tweet at him. I know you like to do that.
Twitter is
great.
also a very good way to get them out in the public answering questions, because they don't know if you're their constituent. And besides, it's public, and even if you're not their constituent, someone else that is probably watching, and they feel a responsibility to defend themselves. But also, you know, get a meeting with your legislator and invite some of us to come along. Even though we may not live in that district, we can come with you and tag team with you for your meetings. And so if we've got somebody living in Toby Harold's district and they're not quite sure how to ask those questions, I'm sure there will be people in this group who would love to tag along. So let's do some tag teaming and hold these guys accountable, guys and gals.
I mean, these bills are going to affect all of Kentucky. So even if it's not your legislator, we need to dig into it, because they do. I'm sure they pick legislators to put bills in because it won't get as hot.
Absolutely.
Because they live, you know, where nobody's paying attention because we're busy working or whatever, you know, and that's the idea.
Absolutely. And tomorrow is a milestone, by the way. January 30th is the filing deadline, and a lot of horrible bills have been put on the back burner until after tomorrow's deadline passes because of what Stephanie's talking about. They're avoiding that backlash. They're avoiding having challengers run against them. And so this is relatively quiet compared to what we're hearing is likely to happen after Tuesday. So we got to be engaged. We got to stay on top of this. And Stephanie's right. So without further ado, I'm going to move on to the next slide, which is Anna Weitz. Anna is our special guest tonight. She is a healthcare attorney, and she has a law office in Frankfurt. And she can probably tell you even more about her background. I apologize that I wasn't able to put much more than just healthcare attorney in her law office name. But if you wouldn't mind, Anna, just tell us a little bit about your background and then some of the healthcare bills that you're watching and what your concerns are about them.
All right, thank you. Such an honor to be here. I'm really tickled. I am a healthcare attorney. I've been practicing for 29 years, and my very first client ever were the community action agencies who do things like Head Start and weatherization and nutrition and GED classes. And so Grant writing for them got me into the healthcare space. And then my second ever client was Greg Stumbo, before he was Speaker or Attorney General, and he got me into politics. And we moved to Frankfurt about 14 years ago. I'm a block and a half from the Capitol. And so all I do is, for my real job, work for healthcare providers, primarily doctors and hospitals and clinics, trying to navigate the insurance, Medicare and Medicaid space. I do a lot of pro bono in the areas of autism and education. We have autism in the extended family, and seeing how difficult it was for me as an attorney to lead my nieces and nephews through that. I can't imagine how English as a second language or single parents deal with that. So autism and schools are near and dear to my heart. And my husband says for my hobby, I do politics. I've worked for KDP off and on, for the House Caucus for a couple decades, and for hundreds of our candidates and state reps. I do about 500 hours of political pro bono a year, so I'm crazy about this. And after the Trump election and the Bevin election, I started a monthly phone call for our Democratic Party chairs and anyone else who's interested and involved in the Democratic parties in our rural counties in particular. And we do a couple hours a month of brainstorming, just so the counties can talk to each other and share ideas and share resources. And in all those conversations, I stick in my healthcare interests, because I'm clearly a frustrated doctor. So this year, healthcare is not getting a lot of flash lightning. People aren't really looking at the healthcare bills, but there are some very interesting bills that I think we will see moving fairly promptly. Some are good and some are bad, and it's always good in the healthcare space to think about not just what the bill does, but how it's going to impact, in particular, Medicaid, because a lot of these activities cost a lot of money, a lot of taxpayer money, and we want to make sure that both sides of the aisle are using that money responsibly. My goal is, even if that Medicaid dollar shrinks, we need to continue to cover as many or more people, and we can do that by being creative and moving Kentucky out of the dark ages in some of our healthcare practices and become a little more nationally prominent in a good way. So SB 46, which is Julia Rocky Adams and Will Schroeder, and that is an act on female genital mutilation. There's been a lot of underground talk about this in the pediatrician and obstetric community over the past couple of years. There are physicians in Kentucky who see that families with this faith base want to engage in that act on their very, very young children. Some of these kids are, 8, 6, some are teenagers. And I think that the physicians thought, well, if we do it ourselves, at least there is painkillers. It's a sanitary environment, which is, I guess, a laudable purpose, but as Senator Adams recognizes, we still shouldn't be mutilating little girls. And so this is really going to help citizens report that. Concerned relatives or school teachers who see this happen to children will have the right and even a duty to report. And it will penalize the doctors. It will criminalize doing that sort of bad act to children. So I think it's a good bill. I think it's one that we should watch and talk about. My mom is a fiber artist, and she did a wonderful, Penny Cisco, everyone Google my mom. She did a wonderful series of quilts on genital mutilation, and it really brought home to the art audience that this is happening in Kentucky today, in Louisville, a lot today, and it's a topic we all, particularly as women and mothers, if we are, should look at. My favorite bill this year is SB 112, which is Senator Alvarado, and it is the telehealth bill. Telehealth is my favorite thing. I'm crazy for telemedicine because it is a way of reaching out to patients if you're a doctor via personal computer, or even in some states, but not Kentucky, by smartphone, so that you can see many more patients in a much shorter time. Particularly in the mental health space, it reduces cost. and stigma and access. If you're in rural Lawrence County, where I'm from, if you have to drive hours in bad weather to see your counselor for your addiction treatment, you have to pay for gas in your car, you have to get a sitter, you have to have a car that works, and if you work a low-income job, you have to be able to get off work. That's an unreasonable burden to put on our rural citizens that maybe in a bigger city you don't have. And so telemedicine and counseling can be fantastic. It also helps rural patients in particular because you can see your hometown doctor and be treated from a specialist at UK via telemedicine. So Dr. Alvarado is on the right side of medicine with this bill in pushing increased access and in requiring Medicaid to pay for it. The weirdest thing to me is that Medicare does not cover telemedicine. And that treats so many of our older citizens who would be really well served by not having to travel long distances to see a specialist. And Medicare won't cover it. Medicaid has been very reluctant until this year, and I work with the state telehealth board.
I'm sorry. There's some kind of noise that's blocking me out.
I'm sorry?
I was just saying that there's some kind of noise on somebody's microphone that's blocking your voice out.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I just didn't know where it was coming from. It was some kind of scratching, like a record scratching.
Okay, well, we'll try again. But anyway, this is a wonderful bill. People should pay attention to telemedicine. Google it and look at it. This is something that would be a huge cost savings and really helps our rural populations get the same access to care that our big city folks do. We no longer under this bill would have to get prior authorization, permission from the insurance company to be treated this way. So that is wonderful. However, this bill and several of the other healthcare bills and bills across the spectrum, we see that the bill does wonderful things. And then in one line, it prohibits or abolishes or repeals a law that provides for oversight by a board or an agency. And in this case, the state telehealth board is repealed under the telehealth statute. The telehealth board is unfunded, and all they do is help doctors and patients learn how to use telemedicine more effectively. So why would you get rid of something that was free? I really dislike the erosion of oversight. And in this case, it puts all oversight in Medicaid or in the cabinet and does away with the state telehealth board, which is made up of practitioners and patients across the Commonwealth. So as we look at all these bills, let's really point out to people how these bills are removing any kind of permissible oversight. I think I'm a big oversight person, so that's a real worry to me. SB 89 is primarily a good bill. It allows APRNs and registered nurses to prescribe controlled substances, which increases access, particularly for addicts, because that's a lower level of care. And there's a lot more APRNs maybe than psychiatrists. And so that increases the ability for people to reach treatment. It also reduces costs. So it's excellent in Medicare and Medicaid because it's a whole lot cheaper to pay an APRN than a psychiatrist. Again, though, this is a bill that deletes an oversight board and says we don't need as much oversight of the APRNs as perhaps we used to have. And again, particularly when we're talking about controlled substances and addiction treatment, I would like more oversight, not less. SB 96 is essentially what we call a cleanup bill. It takes everything that the cabinet wants and puts it in one big bill because they figure nobody's going to read every sentence or object to it. And that bill removes a lot of boards and a lot of oversight and puts all the oversight in the cabinet. For me, it's a concern when the cabinet is the one reviewing its own practices and policies. That bill takes away certificates of need, which reduce big outside and out-of-state entities coming into your hometown and saying, we know you have a rural hospital, but we're going to build a bigger, shinier one. The certificate of need process prevents that, and this bill does away with certificate of needs. This also does away with funding for smoking cessation, and the research I've seen in addiction treatment, particularly in pregnant mothers, shows that the real gateway drug to addiction may be cigarettes. And so if we can get moms and women to stop smoking young, that's valuable. And this bill takes away the healthcare funding for that, particularly Medicaid. And that would be a huge loss for the Commonwealth. SB 94 allows others, including the cabinet, to access CASPR data. That is, every time you fulfill a prescription for a controlled substance, CASPR has a report on that. And when we put that in under Attorney General Stumbo and also under Beshear, we really limited access to that data because we didn't want pharmacists not to report it, and we didn't want addicts to try and evade that by going across state lines. Well, if we allow access to that data to anyone, your local sheriff who doesn't like you and wants to see what pills you're taking, I think that's kind of an erosion of a necessary protection. So in my mind, I think that's not a good bill. HB 219 requires financial support for drug treatment with Commonwealth funds, and this is a good bill. This is a bunch of good Democrats working hard to make sure that when we get big settlements, particularly in the Attorney General's office, we spend those drug settlement monies on the people adversely impacted by the drugs. HB 69 is a credentialing and prompt pay bill, and I was surprised and happy to see this coming from Representative Fleming. Today, if your doctor wants to get credentialed so Medicaid or an insurance company can pay them, they now have to go to the cabinet and all of the MCOs and the Department of Insurance, and that truly can take a year. That really slows down access to treatment for very necessary services in rural areas. Under this bill, they're given 30 days and everyone has to credential you at once. So that is a wonderful bill. Despite the lack of interest in it and the sponsors, this is a bill we really should push because it is going to greatly increase rural access to care and allow patients who switch from one insurer to another to probably be able to keep their doctor, because that doctor will have credentialed with everyone all at once. HB 249 is Representative Harris, and this is to require an insurance company that says we're going to pay for your contraceptives to pay for a year and not make you re-up or get pre-authorization every 3 months or 6 months. It also helps the implants and funding for those, because some insurers had said we only pay for 3 months at a time. So if you're having birth control through an implant, we don't have to pay for that because it lasts more than 3 months. So I would say that is a good bill. HB 246 is a community pharmacy delivery for substance abuse, which sounds so great. We want our local pharmacy supported, and I do. I really like the local providers, and it would be great if they could deliver your medications and take over some of that care. But in terms of cost, it's often more expensive to pay your local pharmacy to deliver treatment and medication than it is to use the big national internet pharmacies. So in this case, my love for the pharmacies is going to be trumped by cost savings, particularly for Medicare. If we go to a community delivery bill, Medicare patients are going to have a much harder, and Medicaid are going to have a much harder time funding medications, particularly as we move towards copays. For a lot of those people, it will be too expensive, prohibitively. House B 124 is licensing for substance abuse providers. Again, a bill that sounds really like a good idea. We all know bad docs who just see patients and give a prescription and move on without really evaluating them. But actually, I believe this bill would lead to, again, limiting access in a small town. If you have one provider for that type of treatment in your town and it takes a long time for them to get credentialed, you're going to end up with no treatment in your town. And so for that reason, I think it's a bad bill. It may be inadvertent, but my concern is this is really going to reduce access and, again, drive up costs if you have to travel for treatment. And the last bill is HB 213, which is another version of Let's Share the CASPR, who's taking pills and what pills they are, more broadly with law enforcement or the cabinet or your DCBS workers. That wasn't the intent of Casper. Casper was supposed to stop pill mills, not allow people to criminalize addiction treatment or pain care. So I don't think those are good bills. Those are bad bills in my book.
Thank you. Stephanie, do we have any questions? Oh, and by the way, while Stephanie's looking at the comments and questions, I had clumped 3 of them together and not recognized that they were 3 separate bills. So the color coding was off. SB 89 is a good bill. SB 96 and 94 are bad bills, and I had them all kind of clumped in there together. So I apologize for that. And hopefully I got that right. Can you double check that, Anna, and make sure that the color coding is correct?
I think that is correct, yes.
All right, thank you. Stephanie, do we have any questions from any of our Facebook Live participants?
Yes, Cindy had asked on SB 112, is there any chance of an amendment to remove the negative repeal of KRS 194.125?
I have a call into Senator Alvarado, so I am certainly hoping so. He's been a huge advocate of telemedicine, and I'm not advocating or lobbying as anyone but a private citizen, but I am very hopeful. Certainly anyone who wanted to reach out and say, please don't remove the telehealth board, that would be extremely beneficial.
That's all I got.
Thank you, Anna. Would this be a good time to also ask you for your feedback on Bevan's Medicaid bill that is getting national attention right now?
The Medicaid waiver, yes. There's been an awful lot written about it. There is a lawsuit that some Kentucky attorneys, Kara Stewart, has signed on and really done a great job writing a great complaint. They're suing Bevan, despite his saying, if you sue me, then I'll just kick everyone off the Medicaid rolls. Kara Stewart and some national attorneys said, well, nuts to you, buddy. We are suing because we think you're wrong. It will be very interesting to watch that lawsuit move through the process. I do think there's been so much attention focused on the parts of the bill that are difficult, the work requirements, the reporting requirements, that maybe we're forgetting that along with the bad sometimes comes good. The very, very tiny sliver of silver lining in the waiver that I'm excited about is that it really allows for pilot programs and new ways of treating populations, particularly addicts. And I think this will allow us to backdoor in telemedicine and some other programs that I think will save Medicaid dollars and assist that population. The waiver doesn't really push residential treatment as much as some other bills that we'll see later this session do. And residential treatment, you could treat, I think, 1 person in residential treatment or 1,000 people in an office. And I'm always going to pick, let's treat 1,000, even if it's not as good. So there is wiggle room in the waiver. We're stuck with it for now. And so a lot of us creative healthcare folks are trying to find ways to see the positive in it.
Terrific. Thank you. All right. We're going to have some time for Q&A at the end. So folks, go ahead and type in more questions if you have any about anything that we've talked about tonight. I've got a couple more slides that are more of the fun discussion that this group will go through, and you guys can listen in and comment on, and then we'll do some final Q&A at the end. So this bill, HB 234, is Mary Lou Marzian's bill, suggesting that male colleagues, it's obvious that legislators think they know more about women's health than women, and they're physicians, so why bother training medical professionals anymore? Obviously, this was a satire bill, but it's kind of fun. Mary Lou has also done a bill about Viagra a couple of years ago, kind of just helping us have a little paradigm shift and rethink some of the arrogance that comes out of Frankfurt, some of the legislation that may be gender specific without thinking about what it's like to have the shoe on the other foot. And so this has caught a little bit of media attention. I think most of us know it's satire. but then there are some people who probably think that it's a waste of taxpayer dollars. I think I saw that somewhere, and I'm not exactly sure how much taxpayer dollars are expended just by posting a bill on a website. But I just wanted to share that with you because I think sometimes it's good to think outside the box and wake people up to some of the things that we take for granted or assume. We know that legislators know more than the people they're serving about. Any comments from the rest of the group about that?
I'm going to weigh in favor of Mary Lou. I love that she puts everyone on the floor in a very uncomfortable position and makes us all use real terms for genitalia and reproduction, and really makes the guys think about how very, very bad they sound to more than 50% of the population. I think most of our problems could be solved if we would all just talk more honestly, and she has zero fear. So I love that.
Absolutely. All right, this other bill, I'm not exactly sure what to make of it, but I thought I'd throw it out here because it's curious. It was Phil Moffitt's bill, and I think that some of the press speculated that it might have been a bill to determine. There's conversation right now that there are Hoover Republicans and Bevin Republicans in the House, and some people speculate that this bill might have been just a red herring that was thrown out there to get people to vote about something they didn't even fully understand, as a way to see who's loyal to whom. So I copied out some of the quotes from the news article that you can see the screenshot on the left-hand side. There were some funny quotes from Angie Hatton. This will neither beautify or bring harmony to Eastern Kentucky. Boundaries in Eastern Kentucky aren't well marked. They're downright confusing. People will rush to mark boundaries which aren't surveyed or established by deed. Walmart will sell out of purple paint in every shade of purple. They might even paint the cows purple. And so that indicated that she knew that this was also a kind of a satire bill with a different intent than Mary Lou's, obviously. But the bill failed, which I think is another interesting takeaway. It failed 50-39, and might have been a way for us to see who the Hoover Republicans are versus the Bevin Republicans. Phil Moffitt has led a charge against Hoover. So there's a petition that was signed by I think 8 total House members, House Republicans, calling for him to step down and I think even like completely leave the House. Is that correct, Anna? Do you know?
That is correct. Yeah, they wanted him to resign, not just his seat, but as a House member.
Yes. So this might have been a telling way to know who was on which side of that particular split. I just thought it was interesting and worth sharing with the group so people can just be aware that these types of shenanigans go on both sides. And if anybody in the group wants to comment on that, please feel free.
Yeah, actually, Wesley Morgan, Morgan had a bill to expel Hoover completely. So that's just another example, and it hasn't gone anywhere. But put that in there, yeah.
We got someone confused. The bill, the people who voted against it, were they Bevin Republicans or Hoover Republicans?
Hoover Republicans.
Yes.
And it's also partly a plays, or one of the main theories that is being whispered about today is it's also a play on if you mix blue and red, it's more like purple, sort of a saying Jeff Hoover's not a real Republican.
Oh.
But who knows? That's probably cooked up after the fact. It's fair.
All right. Well, I'm going to switch to the next screen, which is just a special thanks screen. These are some of the groups that have been participating in our talks or providing some feedback or content. Obviously, we thank all of these groups as well as our women in the legislature. If you've got a group that would like to participate in these calls in the future, that's my cell phone number right there. So feel free to give me a call and we'll make some arrangements. And the next screen I have are just a reminder of action steps that you can take. Call your legislative line. Use the email links on our website. We've got some quick and easy links where you can email the entire House, the entire Senate in one click. the entire half the House in one click and the other half of the House. So it's 3 clicks to get all of the legislators. Plus we have committee links and Twitter handles and lots of ways to get in touch. Send them handwritten notes or letters through the mail. Although right now with everything moving fast, I would say hand deliver them if you're going to handwrite a note. Schedule a meeting in Frankfurt. Take us with you. We're there every Tuesday through Thursday from 11 to 2. We've got a table tomorrow, for example, in the annex basement. It's actually A Few Good Women Kentucky that is sponsoring the table tomorrow. Basically, just since it's the last day to file to run for office, if there's anybody out there that's considering a run and wants to come by and talk to somebody about it, or get us to come in for your photo opportunity, or help you just navigate the last steps along the way, you have until 4 o'clock tomorrow, Tuesday afternoon, January 30th, to file for office. And there are still some seats open. I have the next slide. I'm going to show you some of the seats that are still open without a challenger. Write opinion letters to the local paper. We have to keep our message out there that $400 million that's being invested by the Kochs is not only just buying seats and paying for legislation, but it's creating at what we call AstroTurf groups. So there are these groups out there that look like they're grassroots groups, but they're really put there and paid for by the dark money side of things. And that's where some of that misinformation that Stephanie referred to earlier is coming from, because there's very little consequences, as Anna mentioned, for the groups that are doing these things. They rarely get caught, and there's rarely any fines or prosecution when they do. So we have to make sure that we're doing our due diligence to get the truth out there and counter that narrative. And that may be telling your personal story about your SBDM, for example, at your school, and challenging the messaging that someone from BIPS, for example, is saying about how the SBDMs are bad, because those of us who participate in SBDMs know otherwise. Local control is good. Join Attica for her legislative updates on Fridays at 6. I think this Friday she said she's not having one because she's got another event going on that night. And then again, join us on Mondays at 6. Follow and retweet Wow Kentucky on Twitter. And of course, run for office. Like I said, tomorrow is your last day to file. The next slide is about that. Over here on the left, lists of seats still unchallenged. In the Senate, Senator Wise is still without a challenger. And in the House, we've got Petrie, Rowland, Weber, Carney, Meade, Hoover, Fugit, and Turner, although I think there's somebody that's talking about running against Hoover, filing tomorrow. But again, these are some key individuals. Bam Carney in Taylor is the chair of the House Education Committee. He's very powerful and needs the filing is an insurance policy. It keeps us in the conversation. Once the deadline passes, if they don't think anyone's going to run against them, they aren't as accountable to their constituents. And we have to be making them nervous. And all the way through November, we have to make them nervous, but especially through the next 43 days of session. So here's a link to Forward Kentucky. They have a candidate list that they try to keep updated pretty regularly. So it shows who's filed. Of course, you can go to the Secretary of State's website and see who's filed as well. There's a link here to find your legislator. We've got an event going on Wednesday at 3 p.m. in the Rotunda to meet the educators that have filed to run. More than 33, I think 3 more filed today. So this list that is published here with 33 public educators having stepped up to run should now read 36. And I believe we have a few more tomorrow. We may be at 40 before the deadline is passed. And this has been some tremendous work. David Allen, you may all know who David is. He's been really spearheading, contacting and locating educators to run for office, especially in seats where they voted in favor of charter schools. We have been saying, A Few Good Women Kentucky is a group that has been saying, if you voted anti-public education in 2017, you should not run unopposed in 2018. And so a lot of us are actually stepping up to make sure that our House rep and senators have a challenger because they voted in favor of charter schools, and that is anti-public education. So that is, I believe, all of the slides that I have. So we're going to switch back now and do a last little Q&A. Stephanie's going to read through the comments and see if anybody else has asked any questions of our panelists. And we'll spend the next 5 or 10 minutes fielding those questions.
Sarah had questioned about calling the legislative line. Does anyone feel guilty when you call with a really long message, or am I oversensitive?
I just answered her, but
Yeah.
I feel bad. I've called up. It's taking me up to 20 minutes sometimes. But I feel a little bit badly, but they're still so nice. They're probably the nicest staff I've ever encountered. So don't feel bad, and you can always call multiple times a day. That's okay. Don't feel bad about it. It's their job, and you don't feel bad about getting your voice heard.
Yeah.
Is how I would look at it.
I actually found the room where they work at last week and went in there to take a look at the room to see how it's set up. Now the guy, their boss, was like, "We don't do tours here," and I'm like, "Well, I just want to see." So you go in there, and it was like 4 or 5 ladies, sitting at a desk, and they just take calls and they write it down. I guess if people weren't calling, they'd be bored. So.
Yeah, I can't stress how wonderful they are enough.
Oh yeah, I mean, it makes calling all the more easier than trying to, talk to, a secretary that's trying to hurry up to get off the phone or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm good
And
with it.
I think most of them tend to agree with us when we're calling. I've had people tell me, "Oh, that's a really good point." They'll say something back that tells you they haven't heard that point before. And so that's another reason why it's really important that we call, is because we may relay a concept or an experience that drives it home, that makes the difference in our legislators' vote, or gives them more things they can say on the floor. That's an important piece of it too. We have to give them the language and the dialogue to defend their vote on the floor, because they could be influencing other legislators at that time. There's just too much information for them to all keep up with. And so they need to hear from us about how these bills affect us personally.
Yeah, I remember Attica thanked me once for calling, and she said it's so helpful because if her constituents support something, she can say, "Look how many green slips I've gotten in support of this or in opposition. I'm representing, what they want." So it's so helpful for the legislators to get those calls and those emails.
Absolutely.
And from what I understand, they get out there, within a few minutes of our calls, right? They go immediately out to the floor. So that's good, So if something's coming up at 2:00 to that day, you need to call before 2.
Yeah.
Good point.
And you can call Monday through Thursday, 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. and on Fridays, 7 a.m. to 5 p.m.
Seriously.
So,
There's
yeah.
somebody sitting there?
Yeah, she said there's like a shift. So the person will come in, work the night shift. So if you're, can't call because you're at work, you can call after work.
Seriously, yeah, we should put those hours up. I would have never thought to call after 4 or 4:30.
Yeah, I try to put it on, and it's on the top of the document and the call list. Yeah, it's helpful.
Very cool. Very cool. Any other questions out there?
Let's see. Hold on. There was someone asked earlier if you were going to be there. What time will you be there? But I'm not exactly sure what you were talking about. Maybe that A Few Good Women. Were you going to be out there?
Yeah, we've got representatives in Frankfort every Tuesday through Thursday, because that's when the most business is done. We're there from 11 to 2, and we hang out in the annex basement near the tunnel, near the entrance to the Capitol. So we'll catch legislators going back and forth between meetings or on their way to chambers at 2:00. So 2:00 is 1:45 is a really important time to be there, because that's when they start really rushing through. And we stand there holding our signs. They'll stop and talk to us. I actually hollered out at Bam Carney a couple of weeks ago and just said, "Hey, please don't vote in favor of anything that takes money away from our public schools." And he turned around and came back and talked to me and actually invited me to schedule a meeting. So Lucy and I met with him a week or so ago as a result of just standing there and opening up that dialogue. So they do respect, for the most part, they do respect the fact that we've taken the time to come down and talk to them. They're not scary people. They mean well. Some of them are a little more obtuse than others and refuse to even engage in meaningful dialogue. But for the most part, it's very worthwhile to be there. And like I said, we're there from 11 o'clock to 2:00 every Tuesday through Thursday. And I'll personally be there every day this week, Tuesday through Thursday.
Okay. Let's see. I think we should make a video to show what it is like to call.
I got it. We have that. Together We Will has it on their blog. I'm posting a link.
Okay.
So yeah.
Yeah,
Excellent.
that's what I was thinking about doing when I went in there that day. I was like, hey, what's up?
Yeah, I would love to see what it looks like if you could. I don't know
If I go back here, I'll ask permission to see if I can get a picture or something. I'll try to go about it a better way this time than just, hey, what's up?
And Sarah Gump also recorded herself visiting the Capitol. So it shows her walking through the doors and through the
Oh, wow.
hallways. And that's posted out on the Save Our Schools Kentucky website as well, saveourschoolsky.org. So yeah, there are lots of ways for people to get a comfort level before they head down there. But again, come on down. My cell phone number was posted earlier. Call me when you're parking and I'll meet you at the door. Bring your driver's license. That's what you need to get through security. Bring a sign. It can't be any larger than 2 foot by 3 foot, and no big sticks on it. But and if you don't have a sign, we've got some that you can use. We've got note cards you can use to write a note and drop it off with your legislator. So it's really not as scary or as strange as you might think. And then once you get down there, you actually get really comfortable and you see people that you see regularly. There's a guy named Don Pratt who is out in front of the cafeteria every day holding signs, and he's very friendly. And he'll hold our signs for us too, since he's there anyway. And then, there are people in the offices that are approachable and agreeable. So it's actually a really great place to spend some time, and I really do encourage people to come down and hang out.
Yeah, and I just wanted to put a quick plug. So every Thursday, Planned Parenthood's going to be in the Capitol, and I know that Together We Will has a date coming up. I think it's March 1st. So if you ever want to come and you're free on a Thursday, there are different groups that come with us from Planned Parenthood to the Capitol, and you're free to join us. We'll actually be there this Thursday as well.
Excellent. Well, we're right on the hour-and-a-half mark, so I'm going to switch to the final slide and just remind you guys that next week's program has Connie Courtney with Kentucky Moms Demand Action, and they are opposing Senate Bill 103, House Bill 210, and House Bill 36. And then also Eric Kennedy, well, hopefully, he said he might be on a plane, but he's going to double check his schedule. But we might have Eric Kennedy with Kentucky School Board Association speaking with us about the budget in a lot more detail as well. And again, I would like to thank our guests, Naomi Penner with Together We Will, Tamari Weeder with Planned Parenthood, Anna Weitz, who is a healthcare attorney, Stephanie Conrad, who has just recently filed for state senate, by the way.
Compton.
And pardon? Stephanie
You called me
Compton.
Conrad. I'm Compton.
I do know a Stephanie Conrad, and she's probably listening right now going, I didn't file for state senate.
What?
Stephanie Compton, I apologize for that. And then Attica, of course, who was on earlier but had to get her carpool. We appreciate her for even coming up with this idea and bringing us together to talk about these bills and be more in tune with what's going on in Frankfort. And again, we will see you on Facebook.
Hey,
Ask me your questions.